Welcome to Knock Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live. See, you knew I missed my target, didn't you? You knew I screwed that up, man. I'm gonna skip all that and just say, what the heck? Let's get busy with it. Oh my gosh! I actually I had my knob on my finger on the knob for the music, and I kept trying to turn my mic up, and the music kept getting louder. I'm like, good Lord, man! I had my hand on, and you knew.
The curse of Coffman, come on.
The curse. Oh man, stop it! You're making my stomach hurt more. Okay. All right, so here we go. So we're going to start this thing off with kind of a pickup from last week. The title could be a little misleading. I'm right, you're wrong, but it's more to do with, with religion, because you always nobody likes to know it all unless they actually do know it all. Right. So anyway, that's why you're here, because you know it all. So that's why you're checkmate Coffman. Oh boy. So welcome again, everybody, to Knock Talk. Thank you for tuning in. And Paul, welcome. David, Romeo, Barbara. Awesome. Hey, if you guys could share this on Facebook that we're live, that'd be awesome. I can do it. It just take me a few minutes to kind of pull out all of it. So, if we run out,
I got all the time. I got 2 hours. We're good.
In dog years, maybe. Oh man. Okay, good deal. All right, so let's go ahead and pick it right back up and take it away.
All right. It's always a pleasure to be here. It's a good thing we're never seen in the same room. Probably destroy half of Texas in the process.
Hey, you destroyed.
Right,
hey, you crashed my show. How many times now? 12, 18,
at least half
30?
a dozen. Listen, I have to have the record for
Now,
something.
technically, it was twice, but we'll go with half a dozen. It sounds better.
Come on, so let's fudge the facts a little bit. That's what we're good at.
Hold on, I got to try something here real fast. Are you watching on YouTube?
No.
I can't reach you. There you are. Oh man, I ran out of screen. Oh, you have to watch it later. I was gonna rub your cheeks.
Right.
David, look.
So smile. Do I have a mouth?
That's fine. No, I've got it. I'm overlaid on top of your screen. What is that?
I don't know. It's yours.
Oh, thank you, sir. You're a good man. I don't care what Chaim just told me, so you're good. It's okay. Thank you, son.
Yeah.
Okay, Rabbi, take it away. It's all yours.
Okay, pleasure to be here. So I think what we'll do, we'll see how much, how this goes. But we spoke last week, spoke about the Reform movement, spoke about the conservative movement, and basically why, obviously, the Orthodox, why we think we're right. And at the end, since I, totally got cut off, I had about 20 other examples to give. We're not going to give, all these examples, but I think it's going to be crucial to understand some of the repercussions. And, as I always say, at the end of the day, you can believe what you want. You can say what you want. Bottom line is, if you can't pass it down, doesn't matter. I want to change this. I want to change that. I want to change the other thing, right? Kaufman's law is, if you can't pass it down, then it doesn't work. So we have this thing, obviously, about being right. I saw a post earlier today, whatever, in a group for conversion to Judaism, and the person who was posting, was asking about whatever, a certain type of conversion, right? Wasn't an Orthodox conversion, so all the Orthodox people in the group started bashing one after another. It's not to be recognized. How could you do it? And then people came out against them, and how can let them do what they want? And someone made the claim that, well, we converted Orthodox, like wink, wink. We converted Orthodox in Israel, so now my kids can marry Kohani, right? They can marry Kohani, but it's not true. I mean, I wasn't going to point that out. I should have probably, but that's obviously not true. Why not? Because a convert cannot marry Kohen, right? So even if the conversion's done right, even if it's an Orthodox conversion, a Kohen is not going to marry a convert. It's forbidden. Right, so that goes by the wayside. But what was the point? The point going back and forth, which was it was a slugfest going back and forth, and the point was that on the one side, let them do what they want, right? What do we care? What do you care if some people don't accept it? They don't accept it, doesn't really matter, right? We'll let them do what they want, live and let live, so to speak, and stop bashing them. But the interesting thing, we'll get to that in a second. The interesting thing is a few people said the exact same thing. And they said Orthodoxy came out of the Reform movement. Right? It was born and bred from the Reform movement. Now, I don't know if you understand how silly that statement is. Right? The Reform movement was the late 1800s. Right? Orthodox, everyone was Orthodox up until that point. Okay, you had some going off here, going off there, different things, socialism, communism, etc. But essentially, everyone was Orthodox. So how in the world can Orthodoxy come out of Reform? That makes no sense. Two people quoted the exact same thing and said, see, revisionist history, almost as good as saying there was such a thing as the Palestinian people. Right? Obviously, that doesn't exist either. Right? Second biggest lie next to Christianity. But we're not even going down there. Right? What's the point? The point over here is it's not just we think we're right. Obviously we believe we're right. Right? We mentioned last week what the issues are with the Reform movement, conservative movement. That told a bunch of stories that I heard, I saw, that I myself went through. And at the end of the day, the bottom line is these other things don't work. And if they don't work, you can't pass it down. If you can't pass it down, right? This week's Parsha, we see by Parsha's Lech Lecha, you see that God makes a covenant. He makes a covenant between the parts with Abraham, and that's for Abraham's descendants, right? So the Christians are going to come up and jump through hoops and say why we're not chosen anymore, why we shouldn't be chosen anymore. But essentially, the covenant is forever. Now, if the covenant is forever, that means obviously Jews have to keep it. And if they don't keep it, okay, right? There are repercussions, and we're going to speak about repercussions because this is really what it boils down to. So someone says, oh, I can fool this or I can fool them, and it doesn't matter if we're only 10% of the population, right? If the Orthodox or people who keep Shabbos, let's say, are 10%, 90% of the Jewish people being flushed, my language, they're destroying themselves spiritually. Right? If that is the case, what do I care? We're the minority. Because, as I spoke to somebody once, and they told me we have 2,000 families in our synagogue. I said, well, you're intermarried, right? They said, yes. I said, how many people like you in that synagogue? Right? 50%, 60%. So that means you have 40% of these synagogue, of that synagogue that's Jewish. So passing that down is going to be an absolute disaster. So I said in one generation, they're going to disappear. Even if they are Jewish, another generation they'll intermarry, right? And that's it. But it goes further. Why does it go further? Because what we do and what we keep have unbelievable repercussions, right? We spoke in the idea that there are physical repercussions. If a woman, God forbid, smokes crack while she's pregnant, what happens? Kid can come out deformed. It's not the kid's fault, but there's a reality. If a Jew's with somebody he's not allowed to be with, right? Another Jew, and they have a child, right? They have a child, two people not allowed to be together. The child, the bastard child, we call it a mamzer, right? And a mamzer can only marry someone of the same union or a convert, right? So someone's going to say, oh, convert, what am I, second-class citizen? No. This person has a blemish on the soul. Right? Jewish people have a pedigree. We chose God. God chose us, or the other way around. God chose us. We chose him. Right? Anyone else that wants to join, okay, they can. If not, we're not the same. We're not created the same. Right? We have a different soul. But that's not really, the main point. The main point is what I do matters. And not only what I do matters, there are repercussions. There are unbelievable repercussions. We mentioned the Matrix a number of times. Imagine one person intermarried. If one person intermarries, what happens? Then you have two halves of a whole, right? You have two souls that come together. When you have two souls that come together, one soul gets messed up, right? One soul gets messed up. Now, what about all the children they were supposed to have, right? So now that gets messed up. So now that's only one individual. We're talking about tens, thousands of people, God forbid, intermarry. So a person's going to say, live and let live. You let me do what I'll do. If I only want to read a few books or one book, I learn a little bit the holidays, and that's it. So let me do it. What are you going to say? Come on. You got to be the real deal. How can you take it, How can you make it a travesty of a mockery of a sham? What do you care? What do you want? Blowhard? You're yelling and screaming. You say all these things. Reform and conservative conversions are bogus. Someone said, I saw that video, gave me a headache. I said, okay, turn down the volume. Right? It was only, it really wasn't that long. Right? But regardless, there are repercussions. Right? The Torah tells me clear that in the second paragraph of the Shema, if I do what's right, good. Right? Then, I'll have water, I'll have air, I'll have food. If I don't do the right thing, there's punishment. There's going to be payback. There's no question. So a person who goes through something in a haphazard way, if they do it in a way that's not right, so not only is there going to be repercussions, i.e. punishment, there will be punishment, whether in this world or the next, or both, right? But not only that, it's going to mess up things, right? In other words, let's say, here in Israel, a person can have on their identity card, it can say Jewish on it, it says Israeli on it. Doesn't necessarily mean you're Jewish. Because as most people know, or if you don't, you'll know now, the vast majority of Russians, this is not anything that no one can find out. The vast majority of Russians that have come to Israel over the last 20 years, most of them are non-Jews. Most of them are non-Jews. Now, that being the case, so now you get a huge problem. So now you get a problem. Chief Rabbinet's going to have to sort through who's who, right? You have to have your own list of, okay, this one's not Jewish, that one's not Jewish, the other one's not Jewish, etc. They'll think they're Jewish, right? They'll say, well, I'm Israeli, so what does it matter? Right? Serve in the army, don't serve in the army. Doesn't matter, I'm Israeli. What's the big deal? The big deal is that if you're Israeli, it doesn't necessarily mean you're Jewish, right? And, there are a number of people here, who were in the Knesset, I'm not going to get into politics, right? Major politicians, the mothers weren't Jewish. How'd they get around that? It's a good question. They're Israeli, didn't really matter. It's all hocus pocus anyway, right? God forbid. So people going back and forth in this thread, in this thread that I saw earlier, and what are they saying? They're saying that you just do what you want. You forget about these hotheads. You forget about these people going to say it's my way or the highway. Why do they have to say that? Why don't they mind their own business? Let us do whatever let us do whatever we want. If I want to keep some of it, I will. If I don't, it's my free choice, right? I have the ability to choose. Who says? I was thinking about it. I was thinking about it a little bit earlier. Imagine somebody goes to the church. They weren't Christian, right? They never practiced Christianity. All of a sudden, they had a dream, they had a vision, and they said, okay, this is it. This is the thing for me. So they go to the church, they go to the priest, and they say, I want to convert, right? So now, in general, isn't the priest going to say, well, we have a standard. There are certain things we do, right? It's obviously not my, not my area of expertise, right? I would assume by the Muslims, no different. By other groups, shouldn't be that much different. You can't do what you want. It's not about doing what I want, right? In other words, you got to follow the rules, whatever the rules are. There might be 5, doesn't matter. But you have to follow the rules. You're not going in there and saying, just let me do what I want. Obviously, it doesn't work that way, right? By the Muslims, they'll say, you're better off dead anyway, right? We should kill you anyway. You deserve to die, right? But it doesn't matter. What are they going to say? They're going to say, okay, this is the criteria. So now people come in and they say, oh, look, I have a choice. It's like big, small, it's like big, medium, or large. Big, medium or small. So the person said, no, I don't want too much, right? I only take small. Someone says, yeah, I want a little bit more. I want medium. Someone said, no, I want the whole thing. I want a big gulp. And remember what a big gulp is, right? I want a big gulp. So I have this huge thing. Very good. So we'll water it down a little bit and say, okay, someone comes into Judaism, they say, oh, you want small? You'll go Reform, right? They got a few mitzvahs. You want medium? You'll go Orthodox. You want the whole thing? Sorry, you'll go conservative. You want more? You want big gulp? Oh, so this person will go, Orthodox. But when they say, which is obviously false, when they say, the orthodoxy came out of the Reform movement, do your research, do your homework. Everyone 200 years ago, 250 years ago, everybody was Orthodox. What do you mean they came out of Reform? That makes sense, right? It's just the opposite. People didn't want to be Orthodox. They're the ones to change things, not the other way around. Again, even if you had smaller groups, splinter groups here, there, doesn't really matter. They were small. They were insignificant. Doesn't mean they didn't take people away. But for goodness sakes, you're going to say, we came from them? They had 50 people, and we had millions. Right? We had millions of people. Boom. You say we came from them? Come on, doesn't make sense. So you're going to say, okay, so what are you getting all excited about? What's the big deal? The big deal is what the ramifications are. Now, if you go back, so now you have to go back in history. Right? It's a good thing we just recently started the book of Genesis. You have to go back in history. When we go back in history, what do we see? Genesis chapter 1. Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim ve'es haaretz. Right? God created the heaven and the earth. Right? In the beginning of creating. Right? It's a very hard verse to translate. In the beginning of creating. Right? The beginning of creation. God creates the heaven and the earth. Then he creates everything. So after he creates everything, he creates man. After he creates man, he creates Shabbos. Right? Then you have the story with the snake. The story of Cain and Abel. You have the story with the snake. They brought, eating from the tree of knowledge. They brought death to the world. Then you have the 10 generations to Noah. Last week we read about the flood. So from Noah to Abraham, another 10 generations. Now you get the absolute monotheism. Right? This week's Parsha, Parsha's Lech Lecha. What does the Torah tell me? That Abraham is Av Hamon Goyim, is the father of all nations. Right? So if he's the father of all nations, okay. But the Jewish nation, anyone who wanted to join could have. We mentioned, as the Ramchal says in Derech Hashem, in the way of God, the Ramchal says they could have come to Migdal Bavel, right, by the Tower of Babel, if they wanted to join. So God had mercy. Even up to Mount Sinai, they could have joined. But let's look at the criteria. So you got Abraham, passes it down to Isaac. Isaac passes it down to Jacob. Now, since we're telling the story what happened to them, now the Jewish people have to become a nation because they're not Jews yet, right? Even if they kept the Torah before it was given, they're still not considered Jews really until God gives the Torah Mount Sinai, right? Exodus chapter 20. Good. So now they go into Egypt. They get slaughtered there. 20% of the Jews come out. Means 80% died. Right? It boggles the mind. After all the miracles, 80% died. 20% come out, between 2 to 3 million people. However you want to slice it, means 8 or 9 million people died in Egypt. And they come to Mount Sinai. God gives them the Torah. So now God makes them a nation. Now, if God makes them a nation, let's backtrack, right? I sort of jumped the gun, right? If God makes the Jewish people a nation, what happened in between? What happened all that time before, the beginning of creation? What's the purpose of creation? The purpose of creation was God gave one command. What was the one command? Don't eat from the tree of knowledge. All right, Adam and Eve, blow it. Throw them out of the garden, right? That's it. You don't want to eat from the tree of life? Fine. I'm going to live forever. No, throw them out of the garden. They can't live forever because there's death, right? There's death in the world. Now, stop. If we stop right there, right, the whole purpose, God gave man free will. He wanted them to do the right thing. They did the wrong. If they would have done the right thing, that's the end of creation. They go in the Garden of Eden. God closes up shop. That's it. The world reached its final destination. Obviously, that didn't happen. So God says, okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to plan B. So he goes to plan B. Now, at this point, we have the evil inclination inside. Now, Adam, even though he said, if I eat from the tree, I bring the evil in, every time I do the right thing, exponentially, what happens? My soul goes up and my body goes up, right? I sanctify the body, I sanctify the soul. If I do the wrong thing, I debase the body, I debase the soul. God says, yeah, that's a great idea. And now that's the way it's going to be. There's only one problem. Problem is, I didn't create the world for that. That was not the purpose of why I created the world, right? So that being said, God calls him a heretic. Now, at this point, where they're thrown out of the garden, right? They're now outside the garden. So now what? Now what's the purpose of the world? Now the purpose of the world, what we're trying to do, even though the Reform movement butchered this idea, it's called Tikkun Olam, right? Tikkun Olam, right? We're fixing up the world to where Adam and Eve were before they ate from the tree. Last week in Parsha Noah, what happened? Noah built a vineyard. Why did he bring a vineyard? All the commentaries go crazy. So what's he doing with a vineyard? No, then he gets plastered. Then we see what happened with the sons. Cover him up. One looks, he gets cursed, right? And his offspring are cursed forever. That being said, what's going on? Right? So there's a difference of opinion what that tree was. Right? Some say it was a fig tree. Some say it was wheat. Some say it was a grapevine. Right? A very strong grapevine. So what did he do? He said, I'm gonna take the juice. I'm gonna take the grape and I'm gonna sanctify it and I'm gonna fix it up. But obviously he blew it. There were other people in history try to fix up the sin, and they didn't succeed. Right? So we're still waiting. We're still in that exile. Now you're gonna ask me, okay, so what's the point? What does that have to do with ramifications? I don't know. I'll get to that. What does that have to do with everything? What it has to do with everything is now the Jewish people, okay, they came from Abraham. Abraham passed it on to Isaac. Isaac to Jacob. They get to Egypt. God has to get them to Egypt. They get to Egypt. They understand kingship in this world. God takes them out against their will. Go to Mount Sinai. Now they're given the Torah. Anyone who wanted to join could have joined at this point. Anyone who didn't want to join, okay, now you have to go through conversion, right? And if someone would have said, well, if I would have been there, my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, if I would have been there, I would have accepted the Torah. Well, too bad. Or as we would say, tough noogies. You wouldn't, it doesn't matter. The fact that what happened now is thousands of years later, it's irrelevant. So now you want to be a Jew, you have to go through conversion, right? But the idea is okay. Jewish people got the Torah, so now what am I doing here? What is the purpose of man? You'll tell me the purpose of man was to use their free will the right way, not to eat from the tree, and that's it. But you see, we have trials and tribulations. We see that we can fail. We see that we can be successful, but we see that our actions actually have meaning. And therefore, what I do, since I ate from the tree of knowledge, we mentioned before, the tree of knowledge, all the spiritual worlds intertwined now, right? All totally messed up. So now every action I do that's positive, right, it fixes it up. I make a blessing, it fixes it up. I do the wrong thing, right? It makes it worse or keeps it the same. You know, whatever it is. The Ramchal says at the end of Derech Hashem, my actions, when I do something, it's got the power not to just change me, not to just affect my soul. That's a huge novelty. That should never exist. Why? Because when I do something, the action, I hear the shofar, I hear the book of Esther, I eat something, I make a blessing. That doesn't affect the world. Why should it affect the world? 100%, and who's it affecting me? Because I'm the one doing it. So it's going to affect my soul. It's going to draw myself closer to God. Anything I do in the Torah, right? Even a non-Jew, that's the goal. Anything we do is going to draw ourselves closer. If you do the wrong thing, you're going to take 5 steps back. You'll take 7 steps back. So now I have to keep doing more good in order I get to where I was before. Because my goal is, as the Ramchal says, God wants to give over his goodness. He wants to give over his goodness to mankind. How are we supposed to do that? Right? How are we supposed to be medavik? How are we supposed to be close to him? Right? There's only one way, the Ramchal says, and that is through Torah mitzvahs. There is no other path for a Jew or non-Jew. Right? It's doing what God commanded and staying away from what we're not supposed to do. So you're going to say, well, a Jew's got all these commandments, right? He's got to put on tefillin, he's got to wear phylacteries, whatever they are, he's got to eat matzah, can't speak Lashon Hara, right? He's got to keep kosher, he's got all these things. So non-Jew comes along and says, hey, what am I, chopped liver? You know, the majority of people are non-Jews, so what about me? Right? So what's the answer? They have to keep what's ever logical. What's ever logical according to the Torah. Don't steal, don't kill, but there are many other things. It's only an umbrella. Right? There's 63, 65, some say 70, commandments for a non-Jew, but a non-Jew, what can they learn? They can learn Tanakh. They can learn Jewish philosophy. They can learn Musar, ethics, plenty of things for them to learn. So, but what does a non-Jew want to learn? Obviously, what's forbidden. So I want to learn Talmud, but that's not for you, right? It doesn't mean you're stupid in any way, shape, or form, but it's off limits, right? There are certain things Jews do, certain things non-Jews do. But again, in the bigger scheme of things, this is really the point. In the bigger scheme of things, what in the world are we doing here? What's our purpose in the world? Our purpose in the world, God breathed in the spirit of life. If God breathed in the spirit of life, we all have a soul. Now, again, soul is different for a Jew and a non-Jew, but the spirit of life means a ruach memalalos, says Unkelis, says the Aramaic translation. What's a ruach memalalos? The ability to speak. What does it mean? It means the ability to reason, the ability to make decisions, good decisions, bad decisions. Non-Jews also, right? They have that ability. They can do good things. They can do bad things, right? We're not saying one way or the other. They have to fulfill their own purpose. So when we look at the world, in general, it's not just chomp, chomp, chomp. They ate from the tree. Okay, the world now the world is in plan B, right? Plan B is that we have to die, and we have to go through trials and tribulations, right? The trials and tribulations, either because we made bad decisions, right? Coffman's 614th law, don't be stupid, or 615th law, commandment, don't be a moron, right? We could make bad decisions. God says, okay, I'm not going to stop you, right? If we want to do the right thing, Talmud says, God will help you. If you're going to do the wrong thing, God doesn't stop you. Why not? We have free will, right? We have the ability. If that would be the case, we wouldn't have free will. So now, when I look at the world, in general, the idea is going to be, am I going closer to God, or am I going further away? Now, except for the Bible Belt, right? We'll give the Bible Belt a little bit of slack, right? In certain areas where people are Bible thumpers, even if they may be idolatrous, right? Regardless, we'll call them quote unquote believers. Now, what about everybody else? Right? Everybody else, I would say, maybe a lot of people say they believe in God. But what does that mean? It means a God that has no connection to my life. It means he's too lofty, he's doing other things, he gave other forces, whatever it is. So how do I draw close as a Jew or a non-Jew? What is my purpose in life? My purpose in life is to attach myself to God. The problem is, the book of Deuteronomy, what does it say? It says God is an Eish Ocheles. God eats fire. How am I supposed to draw close to him? Right? There's only one way, by doing what he says. Because he gave us the most powerful book, the most printed book in the history of man. Could be a lot of bad translations, no question. Right? But the most printed book in the history of man, i.e. the Bible. Right? They want to call it the Old Testament, the New Testament, whatever. The Bible's been the most translated and most sold book in the history of man. So therefore, God gave us a blueprint. Now, we did a bunch of videos on how do I know. First of all, there's a God, that he does exist. Secondly, how do I know that the Torah is true? Right? So that's not really, right now, that's not really the argument. The argument is, okay, if I know it's true, how do I know what he wants from me? Right? That's a little bit different. Right? How do I know what he wants from me? Because we said, the Rabbi Chaim says at the beginning, if Derech Hashem, he also says in the path of the just, what does God want? He wants you to attach to him. Now, how am I supposed to do that? Well, it's a good thing. He gave us a book of instructions. But it's not just he gave us a book of instructions. He told us, God said it, Moshe wrote it. So he told us there are repercussions. It's not a free pass to do what I want. If it's not a free pass to do what I want, don't you think if someone does something wrong, there are going to be repercussions? Yes, there are absolutely going to be repercussions. So someone's going to say, according to this post that I saw, live and let live. They're not the majority. They think, it's my way, the highway. So let me ask you the question. The question is what the Torah says, is the Bible true or it's not true? That's what you come down to. If it's true, I have to keep it. If it's not true, God forbid, then you can do whatever you want. Right? But if I have to keep it, I have to know what to do. Obviously, there's oral law. Rabbis tell us what we have to do. Plenty of things we're obligated in, right? There's no question, right? But I have to attach myself to him. The way I do it, the Ramchal says, is through positive commands, right? And staying away from negative things, right? Staying away from negative things. Don't steal, don't kill, don't speak Lashon Hara. For a non-Jew, it's even more severe. Why is it more severe? How can it be more severe? Because they're given commands that, according to the Torah, are natural things. They are natural things that everybody's going to know. There's not going to be any question. They're not going to get upstairs and say, hey, why am I getting zapped over here? You didn't tell me about this. What do you mean? You didn't know you weren't allowed to kill? You weren't allowed to steal? No, you don't understand. We're starving. My kids were hungry. What about looting? You don't understand. Come on. Been oppressed, for the last 400 or 500 years. What a terrible thing. And we're supporting the rights of our great-great-grandparents and how they were treated. But it's stealing, right? If it's stealing, how do you get around that? If it's cheating on your taxes when you're not allowed to, when there's not a legal loophole, that's stealing, right? You have an obligation to keep the law of the land, right? As long as there's no legal loophole. So Jews and non-Jews alike have to go on the same path. What do I mean? They have to attach themselves to God. How do they do that? By Jews, it's keeping whatever the Torah says, right? All the commandments that they can keep. By non-Jews, it's keeping what makes logical sense, not according to me. We're not going according to what I say. We're going according to what the Torah says. So when people have issue, and people say, live and let live, well, they'll say the rabbi's this and the rabbi's that, and who knows what. Again, bottom line, we're not making this up. They may think so, right? But we're listening to what the rabbis say in every generation, right? That's Deuteronomy chapter 17, right? That's what it says. I don't care if someone brought me a crummy translation. That's what it says. That's what it means. If that's the case, then how am I allowed to go off another path? Not only that, within Judaism, it doesn't make sense because these other so-called movements are only around for a couple hundred years. So what does that tell you? That tells you up until that point, everything was like it should have been. That doesn't mean there was a 100% track record passing it down. People fell by the wayside in a lot of different ways, right? People were murdered. They wanted to get away from religion because it was too hard. There's a lot of anti-Semitism. There was communism. There was socialism. A lot of different things, right? A lot of persecution that they went through. So that being said, that doesn't mean it's not true, right? That's not a proof it's not true. It's just that they don't want to uphold, it's too hard. How in the world can I do it? It's just, I'm going to get penalized left and right. I just heard a story, yesterday, because it happened yesterday. And again, not going into politics, right? But there was a Jews for Trump sort of parade in New York, and they got shellacked. So you might say, wow, it's only because of Trump. They don't care if they're Jews or not. Maybe, right? But again, Jews are getting shellacked all over the place, right? So what would a person say? Some people are going to say, no, I want to be even more Jewish, even though they're not necessarily going to be religious, right? Or they could say, I don't have anything to do with Judaism. I'm going to hide it. I'm going to do my best to hide it as much as possible. That's what a lot of people do, right? In general, even though they have, a Jewish last name, but you couldn't tell the difference. Unless they're like, hook nose and everything else, they look very Jewish. Okay, right? Certain things you won't be able to hide. But that being the case, that has nothing to do with this argument. Because what people are going to claim is live and let live, right? You just don't tell me, why you think you're right. Don't tell me the Torah this, the Torah that. I want to do what I want to do. Okay, that's not Torah. And if you're into marriage, you're not a Jew. Okay, right? There are repercussions. You cannot say, again, logically speaking, you cannot, and we're not going to argue anything else because we want to keep it very simple. Logically speaking, you cannot talk out of both sides of your mouth, right? You're going to say live and let live. How in the world do you have a right to say anything? You're right, 100%. I don't have a right to say anything. I'll let the Torah do the talking. This is what the Torah says. Now, if you have a problem, it's not with me. Who's it with? It's with the Torah itself. So I thought an interesting thing today. Interesting thing that the Shari Tshuva, the gates of repentance, Rabbeinu Yonah, in the third gate, he speaks about repercussions for our actions, the severity of our sins. And he goes, step by step, things that are less severe to more severe. One of the things he speaks about is the fact that a person can lose their portion of the world to come. Right? So everyone thinks, that every Jew has a portion of the world to come until you lose it. They don't learn the next part of the Mishnah. Right? They don't look at what the Talmud says on that. Okay, but there are ways a person can lose their portion of the world to come. So the last few weeks, what did I speak about? That what does Rabbeinu Yonah say? He says somebody who scoffs at the rabbis. They make fun. Right? Exactly what's supposed to happen in this generation right before the Messiah comes. Right? The absolute chutzpah. They make fun. They say things. They don't care. Right? Doesn't matter how much they know. They say, a bunch of sponges. What are they doing with their lives? They're looking at these old books. Why aren't they going to college? Why aren't they going to university? Why aren't they writing books on tax law? In Greek mythology, and other things that are benefiting the world. All these different great things. They're sponges in society. They're not doing anything. Okay, let's backtrack. Right? When you look at something like that, what does the Ramchal? What does the Rabbeinu Yonah say? The Rabbeinu Yonah says an unbelievable thing. Rabbeinu Yonah says, you scoff at the rabbis, you make fun of them, right? That's what the Talmud says. Who's an Abikoris? Someone who's an Abikoris loses a portion of the world to come. What's an Abikoris? An Abikoris is a heretic. So who's considered a heretic? One definition, the Talmud tells me, is what do I need these rabbis for? They don't do anything for the world, right? Nothing's changed last 2,000 years. What do I need these rabbis for? That's a heretic. Right? How can a person lose a portion of the world to come? They don't believe the Torah is from heaven. They don't believe, they don't believe Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it, or got it from God, etc. Well, a similar thing. Or let's say some of the prophets, they made it up themselves. God forbid. All these different things. But comes along the Ramchal. Comes along the Shari Tshuva. Comes along the Rabbeinu Yonah. And the Rabbeinu Yonah here says, I'll just read it here for a second. Rabbeinu Yonah here says, why do they lose the portion of the world to come? Someone who disparages and makes fun of the rabbis. He says because they profane Torah. It's considered like they profane Torah. Why? Why is it so severe? Because who represents Torah? The rabbis. Right? They're the ones that represent Torah. Right? Rabbinic scholars. So the Talmud says these stupid Babylonians, they stand up for people, but they stand up for the Torah, but they won't stand up for rabbinic scholars. Don't rabbinic scholars represent what the Torah is? So it says, how can they not stand up for rabbinic scholars, but they only stand up for the Torah? Says Rabbeinu Yonah. Rabbeinu Yonah says, therefore, says our rabbis of blessed memory, Torah tells me, Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 13, it says, I read it in Hebrew, Es Hashem Elokecha Tira. The Lord your God you shall fear. You have an obligation, God says, to fear him. Says Rabbeinu Yonah, the rabbis, Talmidei Chachamim. That's including rabbinic scholars. So I had a little fun with this today. And what did I say? I said very simple. Here the Torah tells me, the Torah tells me I have to fear God. So the rabbis explain fearing God includes listening to the rabbis and fearing them, really fearing them. Because he said before, if you don't fear them, right? If you don't fear them, that's pretty bad. Right? That means you don't fear God. That means you don't fear Torah. So let's analyze for a second. They're going to make fun. They're going to say, oh, these sponges are not doing anything for the world. They're not writing books on tax law. Comes along Rabbeinu Yonah And he says, you know what? If you don't fear the rabbis, if you don't have proper respect, you don't fear God at all. You desecrate God's name. You don't show the Torah respect. Isn't that what it's all about? Right? Again, we started at the beginning of creation. So my goal is for Jew or non-Jew to attach myself to God, right? To do exactly what God wants. Whatever non-Jews have to do, whatever Jews have to do, right? And that means every last thing the rabbis tell us I have to keep. And I have to respect them. If I don't respect them, I desecrate, I defame them, right? That's his language, right? That is the language of what the Talmud says. Right, if I find it here. Right, that is the absolute language over here. That if you don't fear them, right, if you don't fear them, then 100% you are going to scoff at them. You are going to make fun of them. But you learn it out from what? The fact you don't fear God. If you don't fear God, you're not going to fear them. You're going to desecrate. He says, you're going to desecrate the Torah. That's what it's considered. That's how severe it is. So therefore, person, now I'm going to bring this full circle. And then you're going to tell me, okay, so this person's telling you, doesn't matter. You can believe what you want. Do what you want. Don't listen to these hotheads. Definitely turn me off. That's it. Why'd you have to listen to them? I can do what I want. But if you do what you want and you go against what God says, right, what's going to be? There are repercussions. You cannot say, well, no matter how you slice it, you can't walk through the Bible and come to the conclusion there are no repercussions. That a person can't do. All you have to do is read it. Someone can say, well, how do you know that? You ever watched the movie? No. Read it. Read in whatever language you understand. It's all about doing what's right, staying away from what's wrong. And we see there are repercussions, right? We see even Cain understood killing his brother was wrong. He understood there were repercussions. It's already in the air at the beginning of creation. Cain wasn't Jewish, not by any stretch. God wants him to repent. He wants to draw him closer, right? 100%. But he understands there are repercussions. So therefore, someone comes along and says, live and let live. How can I live and let live? There are repercussions. You marry a non-Jewish woman, your kid's not Jewish. You say, according to you. Again, you have to prove the onus is on the other side in order to prove that their belief system is right and that we're wrong. Right? I have plenty of proof to show why we're right. But the onus is on them. If they say, well, I just think it. I just feel like it. And I'm not going to be like you. And I'm not going to be Orthodox. That's not an argument. That's not an argument whether to show it's true or not. Now, the vast majority of people do not want to get into this argument. We mentioned this last week. Right? We just reinforce. Why don't they want to get in the argument? Because if you prove them wrong, their life is over. If they're intermarried, what are they going to do with their spouse? Their kids. They're not going to go in the same direction. They're in trouble. Right? So better say, nah, it's stupid. This doesn't make sense. And all that. They're not going to look into it. They're not going to be interested, in searching out the truth. That doesn't mean it's not true. So if someone's going to say live and let live, you got to come along and say that doesn't make sense. Because how can you say live and let live if there are, if there are no repercussions? Obviously, there are going to be repercussions, right? So someone will joke and say, okay, so they won't accept it. Others probably will. So now I'd ask the $1 million question, if it's questionable, and other people down the line, somewhere down the line, it's going to be questionable and your kids will be questionable. That means even when they get married, going to have issues. There are repercussions. It's not just a free-for-all, but the way the other so-called movements make it out, it's a free-for-all. Do what you want. Make up your own Hebrew name. Write it on a marriage document. You write your name, it doesn't exist. You don't have a name. again, it's not, maybe it's not the worst thing in the world. You have to look at these things, either you laugh or you cry, right? Because at the end of the day, when you hear some of these things, you say, come on, is someone really going to do that? And the answer is they don't care. And to them, it doesn't matter. They think it's all make-believe anyway. And this is some ancient concept. Okay, we'll do it, but whatever. And it doesn't matter. There's serious repercussions, right? And if you don't care about the repercussions for yourself, 100% you should care for your kids, right? Because, if a person, God forbid, had a child with somebody they're not allowed to be with, and now that child wants to become religious, they're in trouble. They're in trouble because they can only marry someone of the same union or a convert. You're already blemishing them from the get-go. So they're going to say, yeah, it's all make-believe. It really doesn't matter. But for them now, it matters. For them, it has repercussions. You think it's all make-believe. You think it doesn't really matter. You think, oh, I can do what I want. I can do the moonwalk. Who cares? It's irrelevant. Not true. Definitely not true. So that argument 100% goes by the wayside, because it's not just about you. If it's just about you, you're not having kids, okay, right? It's okay. So maybe you tell me it doesn't have far-reaching repercussions. But if it affects future generations, right, and they're always going to be questioned, I don't think people in general, some may not care at all. So you can take this with a grain of salt. I can't imagine, people are going to say, well, I don't care what anybody says. I'm just as Jewish or whatever. Now, you take the story of Haman, right? The book of Esther, right? Haman's got power. He's got real power, tremendous power. He's got power. He's got money, right? He's got everything going for him. Everybody bows down to him. Everybody, there was this, this idol worshiping idea. Anytime he walked in the room, everyone went on the floor, right? Hands and knees, bowed. Walked in again, bowed. Walked in the third time, bowed. Except one person. Who was that one person? Mordechai Yehudi. Now, they had a history. They had a history before, right? Without going into all the detail. What did he do? He was so enraged. He says, not only am I going to destroy you, I'm going to destroy your entire nation. Now, it's one thing you have a personal vendetta. Right? What could he do? He could certainly, hire a hitman, have him killed, have his family wiped out. That's it. Right? Nothing else happens. But he doesn't do that. He takes revenge, or wants to take revenge, against everybody. Against the entire Jewish people. Now you're going to say that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense logically, but it does. Why? Because he's been living a lie his whole life. He knows that Mordechai knows the truth. And he knows that it bugs the heck out of him that he won't bow. It's everyone else, with all the money, all the power, all the fame, doesn't mean anything. Why? Because he understands it's fake. So why is it people get upset at us, meaning people like me? They'll get upset and say, oh, it's your way, the highway. What do you care? Just say he's a fanatic. He's a fruitcake. He doesn't know anything. But according to you, I can't even tell you. I've heard a number of times. Well, according to your religion, Jews talking. According to your religion, what do you care? Why does it bother you? I'm one person. Why in the world does it bother you? You know why it bothers you? Because you have a conscience. And you have a Jewish conscience. Now, for some people, you might tell me, they don't have a conscience at all. To them, it doesn't matter. You don't agree with them. They can say, I don't care. Totally irrelevant. Right? For a lot of people, they don't want to have the doubt. They don't want to have a cloud hanging over their head. But again, they'll do what they want. And it doesn't really matter. They'll say, oh, the Orthodox are crazy. Oh, they're fanatics. Oh, they take everything literally. And look at them. Look at the way they dress. They're spreading the virus. They're doing all these things. All these terrible things. Same things the anti-Semites say. Jews are no better. So they'll say all these things. Why? Because they want to have legitimacy. They want to say, I'm okay. And you cannot put me down. I'm not putting anyone down. Right? You want to do what you want to do, okay. But if you come and box me in a corner, and you come and ask me, you come and say, well, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I don't think, I don't think same-sex marriage is a problem, and I think you're homophobic. Okay? But I hold by Leviticus chapter 18. It's not my law, it's God's law. So argue with him. That's black and white. We're not getting into oral law. We're not getting into anything else. Black and white. Right? But why do they feel inferior in a certain way? Why do they feel they're always being judged? Because they think someone's looking over their shoulder. Do you think ultra-Orthodox people in general, they go out to work, they're on the train, they're sniffing over Jews' shoulders saying, I think this has shotness. I think it's got a mixture of wool and linen. Boy, maybe I should warn them. There's a conscience. They may not admit it. I don't care what you think, but why does it bother you? Why do you make fun of it? Why do you say, if I breathe on your food, it means it's not kosher? It means you got an issue with it. And the issue is it irks you that I think I'm right and you're wrong. See if you got proof. Bring it on. Let's see. Let's see where all the proof is. But it's not about live and let live, because you got a problem. You got a problem. What's the problem? The problem is, what do you do with somebody like me? Somebody like me says what you're doing is wrong. Somebody like me is saying that according to the Torah, what you're doing is a joke. Right? Now, you understand that. You're going to say, I don't care. I'm going to do what I want. This is what's best for me and my family. Whatever the case is. Right? However you're going to justify it. But I'm not walking down the street or going anywhere thinking, what's this person going to think? What's this person going to do? I have to be careful, right? If you represent Torah, you got to be careful outside. True. But in the end, I have to be and do what I have to do, right? I have to do what the Torah says. And I mentioned it in my video last week, last week's Parsha, an interesting thing, and my Rebbe brings down that there's a question by Abraham in the test of Ur Kasdim. When he's in Ur Kasdim, what happens? He gets thrown in a fiery furnace, right? There's a medrash that his father Terach had idols, and he sold idols, worshipped idols, and he was out one day, and Abraham came, destroyed all the idols, sticks a stick in the hand of one idol, etc. And his father comes back and says, "Hey, what happened?" He said, "Oh, there's a big fight. All the idols are fighting." and Terach turns around and says, "What are you talking about? They have no power. They can't do anything." So Avram says, "So what are you doing worshiping them?" So he says, "Oh, smart aleck, let's take him to Nimrod. I'll take him to King Nimrod." So Abraham has a lot of fun with him, talking about power and different things. Nimrod throws him in a fiery furnace, and he comes out unscathed. Right now, there's a difference of opinion. There's a difference of opinion among the commentaries whether that's one of the 10 trials. So Rebbe asks the question, well, according to those, i.e. the Rambam, I think the Rambam's the one that holds that it's not considered one of the trials. How is that not one of the 10 trials? Right? He has to leave his, where he lived. That's a trial. It's a famine. It's a trial. He has to fight the 5 world powers. To save his only nephew, Lot. All kinds of trials. Got, circumcision. He has to sacrifice his son. All these different things. What happened over here? Why is this any less? Why in the world should it be any less? Right? So it brings down a very interesting idea. And the idea is by him it wasn't considered a trial. Why? Because even if he understood, like Rabbi Akiva understood, that if he teaches Torah in public, he's going to get killed. And when you say the Shema v'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha, kol levavcha, kol nafscha, kol me'odecha, that you're gonna love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might, or all your money. Rabbi Akiva said, all your soul. Oh, I've been waiting my life to sanctify myself to God. And then he got caught, and the whole thing, he's going through this whole sermon as he's being killed. So Rebbe says it's all the same thing. The idea is that he understood what the repercussions were. But for him, that was a natural thing. In other words, you might say, well, isn't that suicide? Right? Why isn't that suicide? You're setting yourself up. Because if you get caught, that they're going to kill you. Right? So I would have said maybe that's considered suicide. But according to this idea that the Rambam says, that this isn't one of the trials. Why not? Because what he goes through, he understands what the possible repercussion is. And for him, it wasn't a test. Why wasn't it a test? Because, if you do X, you're going to have these repercussions. So for him, it was a natural outcome. And if he got caught, this is what he has to go through. It wasn't like, oh, should I do it? Shouldn't I do it? Etc. There was a decree made. The decree is you're not allowed to teach Torah in public. You teach Torah in public, we will kill you in a horrific way. What happened? Taught Torah in public, and he got killed. Right? And he died. Now, that being the case, and everyone say the similar thing. Because he understood 100% that what? That even though there are repercussions, and he's willing to sacrifice himself for what the Torah wants. First of all, it's not called suicide. Second of all, that's not even a trial. For him, right, at his level, right? My Rebbe clarified and said, this is for the truly righteous. This is not for everybody, right? I should have made that clear. This is only for the truly righteous. But he understood the ramifications. He understood the repercussions. And if he understood it, and he's willing to go through it, he's not second guessing over here. Should I do it? I shouldn't do it. It's good. It's not. This is what I have to do. And through Rabbi Akiva, even though 24,000 of his students died, he still passed on oral law to 5. And they were able to pass that down to the future generations of what we have, of what we have today. So by him at that level, he's talking about a very high level. For him at that level, right, that's not a trial, right? That's just the ramification, of something. Okay, right? So, someone at his level, fine. For us, okay, that maybe it's not for us. Maybe it's truly only for the righteous. But the point, we can't lose sight of is the fact that there is right, there is wrong, right? And, again, if you can't pass it down, you make a travesty of a mockery of Hashem. I don't care what your philosophy is. It's 100% irrelevant. At the same time, you can't say live and let live. So why? Because either it's right or it's wrong. You can't be in the middle and say, just let them do what they want. So now they have to prove why for them it's right. And then someone will say, no, I don't. They can just do what they want. Doesn't matter. For them, it's right. For them, that's what they're going to do. For them, they're not going to change. But that doesn't answer the question, right? If you were arguing this in a debate team, right, you would be slaughtered. That is, first of all, it's not a way to argue, right? Even if you don't want to say that, how can you not say there are repercussions? How can you just say, let him do what he wants? Well, I have proof that it's wrong. Well, you believe in the Bible, right? So how do you know the Bible's true? Great question. How do I know the Bible's true? Right? So let's go through different proofs and see. Maybe it's not true. Maybe you're right. Right? Let's see different things to see if it pans out. But you're never going to get there. You're not going to get 5 minutes in. You're not going to get 10 minutes in because these people are frauds. Why are they frauds? Because they're not willing to live up to the test. Because if they live up to the test, as someone told me many years ago, if I look into the Torah and I find out it's true and I have to change my life, that ain't happening. That is not something that I'm going to do. Right? And that, so okay, that person was intellectually honest. How many people are going to say that today? I don't think too many. Right? I think in essence that most people, even if they say, as we mentioned, even if they say they're agnostic, when's the last time they checked it out? When's the last time they thought about it? They haven't. And if they haven't, then okay, it's just something to say because, well, maybe they aren't sure. Okay, but if you have a doubt about something, you look into it, right? If it's something that's pressing in your life, you look into it. If a person wants to buy a house, you got to look into all the nook and crannies, how much you need, down payment, credit score, how much you can afford, all these things. You're going to look, you're going to compare, you're going to shop, you're going to do all these things. But something like this, you're not going to do. You're just not going to do it, right? Some people may do it. There may be a small amount, that might actually follow through, right? But the vast majority, they're going to say, nope, I'm an agnostic. And if I'm an agnostic, okay, so I have doubts. I'm not really sure. Okay, so I'd be obnoxious. And I would say so when are you going to look into it? What are you going to look for? What's going to potentially change your mind either way? You box them into a corner. They're not going to have what to answer. I mean, they might make something up on the spot. That they might do, right? But in the end, in the end, it's either they have to go one way or the other. And if they go one way that shows what they're doing is wrong, and they see in the end that the Torah is true, then they're in a pickle. Then they're in a tremendous dilemma, right? And that's why a lot of people are not going to look into it, exactly for that reason. So so the point over here is just part of this, just part of this follow-up, is the idea that live and let live is not a Jewish concept. The Rambam says the beginning of 13 Principles of Faith. The Rambam says it's either you believe in God is absolute, or you believe in idols. He doesn't say, well, maybe, I think, maybe this, maybe that. He doesn't say that. No wishy-washiness. It's either you're on one side or you're on the other. Now, if maybe you have doubts, you're not clear, so you can't just stay in the middle forever, doesn't make logical sense. I do understand what you're going to do and why you're not going to go in a different direction. Makes sense. It's not intellectually honest, which most people aren't, right? So at the end of the day, someone's going to say, you got to live and let live. And, you can't just say, well, you're right, and everyone else is wrong, right? So you might say, well, person might be conceited and say, yeah, I think I'm right, and I think I got a tremendous amount of proof as well. So then you have to be the one on the other side. You have to be the one to disprove it. And you have to be the one to say, oh, this isn't true, right? It's not true because of this. It's not true because of that. But you're not doing that. You're just saying, let them do what they want. But if we let them do what they want, and you don't hold fast to what the Torah says, God doesn't give you options. God doesn't say, well, just let them live. If you feel like doing it, he says, no. The Torah is either right or it's wrong, right? In other words, not the Torah, but whatever I do either falls in one category or the other. There is no possible way to say it's right in the middle. If it's right in the middle, how can you say that? Right? Absolutely 100% doesn't make sense. And it shouldn't make sense. But people get carried away in this, this leftist ideology. And they'll say, just leave them alone. I'm not saying anything. Right? What I'm saying, it's what the Torah says. You don't like it, you got a problem with the Torah. But if you don't like it, and you say, oh, the Torah is this, the Torah is that, you have to find the flaw. You have to find where it's wrong. And you have to show why it's wrong. If you don't show why it's wrong, then what you say doesn't make sense. Right? Then what you say doesn't add up. And if it doesn't add up, what are you arguing about? Right? So some of these people might be a waste of time. 100% might be a waste of time unless you can engage them in facts. And not just about, certain high in the sky, ideology. It's about, can I show it or can't I show it? And if I can show some of it or a good portion of it, then even if I can't show the other part, I got enough proof to say this is enough, right? Question is what that number is, doesn't really matter, right? But if I can show a number of the plagues happened in Egypt and I got papyrus and I got other things to substantiate, then the other ones I haven't found, you go, oh, but you didn't find this. That's what people can argue. Oh, you didn't find the other thing. Oh, you didn't find this, but it doesn't matter. I found 60%. If I found 60%, why would you think the other 40% didn't happen? And the answer is because you don't want to believe it. Because if you believe it, you're in trouble, right? And that's really what it comes down to, is that that we are sticklers for truth, that, we want to believe 100% it's true and we can pass it down. And the only ones that have success passing it down are us, right? You look at the next generation and any other so-called movement doesn't exist, right? Doesn't exist spiritually, right? With 60%, 70%, into marriage. So that being the case, there is no argument. There is no argument on that side. It's like, okay, Judaism will die. But if the Torah tells me the covenant is forever, forget about the Christians. If the Torah tells me a number of times this covenant is forever, and if you break it, you're going to get punished, that doesn't mean the covenant gets broken altogether. So if that's the case, yeah, we can be tossed around. There can be pogroms. There can be Holocaust. There can be all kinds of different things. But the onus and the burden of proof is going to be on the other side. I have no doubts. We have no doubts that the Torah is true. If you have doubts, okay, so you have to try and clarify the doubts. If you don't want to clarify the doubts, you just say, well, I'm an agnostic. Live and let live, right? That is not an argument, right? Which we've seen, and that cannot go anywhere. And it won't go anywhere. So our goal, right? Just finish up here my next hour and a half. Yeah, our goal is to draw close to God. That's exactly what he wants. And we have to do it the best way. Doesn't mean it's easy. Certainly by any stretch. But non-Jews have the ability to tap in, right? If non-Jews have the ability to tap in at the same time, right? So they have to do what God says, right? At the highest level. And if they fail, okay, there are repercussions. But you have to say, when you look at what the Torah says, that the Torah says clear many places that you will be severely punished, etc. if you don't do the right thing. A person cannot claim, well, God was kidding, or they just made it up, or they just for emphasis, or I don't know. They come up with all kinds of ideas. But it is interesting when you try and peg someone down. What you could end up happening is they'll just give you an answer, a flippant answer that they just thought of, 30 seconds before, and they're not really thinking about, what the truth is. They just want to get you off their case. They just want to feel good about what they do, and that's what most people, right? Most Jews today are what I'll call touchy-feely type of Jews. They want to feel with the cardiac Jews. They want to, do certain things. They want to feel good about Judaism, but not too much. Okay, but that's not what my Torah says. And if you want me to say what you do is okay, that's not going to happen if it's forbidden, right? If it's something permissible, okay. If you're doing the right thing, fine. If but that's according to you, right? I had this discussion, with somebody about, but into marriage, I mentioned about somebody, somebody's into marriage. The Orthodox do not hold a patrilineal descent, right? In other words, if the mother's Jewish and the child's Jewish, right? So I said, well, if this person's not Jewish, right, and the person they marry isn't Jewish, okay, as long as they don't get married in the church, which they probably wouldn't, then there shouldn't be any problem going to the wedding. And this person was like, the person obviously was Jewish, is like, I don't think that way. I said, okay. I said, you don't have to think that way. It's what the Torah says, right? You go after the mother, not the father. So if you go after the mother's not Jewish. Kids aren't Jewish. If they marry non-Jews, okay. As long as it's not an idolatrous place. He might not be able to go to the wedding for other reasons, maybe modesty issues, other things. Or if it's on Shabbos, whatever the case is. Two non-Jews getting married, what should be the problem? Why shouldn't you be able to go if it's a family wedding? Shouldn't be an issue. But this person was taken aback, like, oh, I don't think that. I said, okay. I said, you want to believe? You want to believe they're Jewish? Okay, believe they're Jewish. We obviously don't believe that. So according to this, it shouldn't be a problem. As long as there's no church, no modesty issues, no other, they're not getting married on Shabbos or a festival or any of these things. It should be permissible to go, right? And that would make a lot of peace in the family. It would kind of ironic. People think they're Jewish. You're the most Jewish one there, right? And the question is, so what are you doing there? Well, it's kind of a roundabout way, right? Kind of a roundabout way to get there, but it's kind of, it's kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting if you look at it, in a total opposite way. Because this person was like, all right, whatever. Because I just hit them in a different way they weren't necessarily expecting. Like, oh, I don't think that way. It's okay, but the Torah does, right? And this is what we believe, and that would make sense, right? According to this, imagine, a Jewish person goes to, these two people he considers not Jewish, and these other Jewish people, they are thinking that they're Jewish. So it's a funny thing. It just means that we're living in a messed up, 100%, in a messed up world. But again, in that case, if there weren't any of these other issues, it'd be 100% permissible to go, right? Especially for the sake of family peace. That would make peace like no tomorrow. And people would think like, what are you doing here? I was like, what do you mean? I wouldn't necessarily say, that would be the reason that I don't consider them Jewish or whatever. I mean, I might tell someone privately, say in public, I might get slaughtered for it, but that's reality. So that's the reality. There's no issue. But again, that's just showing how far gone we are in today's generation, unfortunately, when it comes to Judaism.
Very good. Very good. I was thinking you're only about 11 minutes over, but since you're paying me by the minute, that's I'm just kidding.
Listen, you were outside surfing for 25 minutes. What do you want?
No,
I
it's
got
all
the
good.
hidden camera. I'm going to show it afterwards.
That's funny. That's funny. Good deal. All right. Well, just as one summary thought that I've had that kind of helps me along with the concept of the oral law and the concept of Hashem giving the rights to the Jews to guard and to keep the commandments. We can't go anywhere in the United States that I know of and go putting on a policeman's uniform, out in public unless it's Halloween, right? Or Purim, if you want to call it that. But if you do, and you go down the street wearing a police officer's uniform or drive in a cop car, and you try to act like one of those, you will literally go to jail. I mean, so my logic was, okay, so how much more holy is Hashem than the world? And so, I mean, I'm thinking if I'm not actually Jewish, then I shouldn't be wearing a kippah. I shouldn't be wearing fringes or tzitzit, and I certainly shouldn't be doing the things that would identify me specifically. This is what
you call Torah made in my own mind.
Okay.
And people think it doesn't really matter. So,
right.
So what if I wear it? What do you care? But again, there are certain things that are made for Jews, not for non-Jews. But sure. I want to do it, and I want to do this. Well, there are plenty of things I want to do I can't do. Mm-hmm. It's not about what I want to do. It's about, it's about laying yourself down and doing the right thing because that's what God wants, and that's a much harder thing. That's much a harder thing to do.
Right. It does. It makes sense to me. It was an interesting battle to cross because when I first entered the conversation realm. About 7 years ago, I didn't have the right resources to work with, and but fortunately, since I've been a captive audience to all of my rabbis here for the past 6 years, things tend to.
Listen, you are one tough nut to crack. We've been working for years, years.
I told you my system will crack before I do, and you already cracked it twice. So
I'm surprised I didn't crack it more.
That's funny. Good deal. Well, hopefully we're Coffman proof now. So, but all right. Well, Rebbe, thank you so much for your time. Thank you all for tuning in. Appreciate it. And you guys be sure to like and share the videos. And we'll look forward to seeing you. Not next week. I'm going to be out of town on a job. Next week I will be totally gone. So 2 weeks, Hashem willing, we'll be back in the studio again with everybody.
You guys get a break from me. Enjoy it.
Yeah.
Go get a tan, something.
Next show tonight, Rabbi Stuart Federer, 7 p.m. TNT. We'll see you guys there. Rabbi, thank you so much. We'll see you soon. Shalom, everybody.
חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה והכמיהה. אני אתה אתם תמיד תמיד כולם ביחד. חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד.